Welcome in, I'm Artress, and in this video we're going to be revisiting Black Purple Luffy. I think that the build has changed since my initial video at the start of the meta, and I think it's worth revisiting this leader because it is a little bit different in how it plays with how I originally showed it off as. The reason I want to revisit this leader is because it is going to be February very soon, and with February there will be a string of treasure cups that a lot of people will be playing in a competitive setting in. And so during that time, it's, I think, worth exploring some decks that might not be number one in the meta, but could be a very viable pick to play, because not everybody wants to play Doflamingo, not everybody wants to play like Shanks or PB Luffy, and considering that with regionals a couple, maybe weeks or a month ago at this time of the recording, that we saw BY be pretty prevalent during those times, we could see a rise of BY, and as a result, I think Black Purple Luffy could be a decent deck into it, depending on how you play it, of course, but I think that there are some tools at Black Purple Luffy's disposal that you could take real advantage of. Before we go over the deck list and talk about the changes that I've made to it since I originally showed it off, if you like the video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and also, if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps out the channel so much. Thank you all for the support. Additionally, if you'd like to talk about the One Piece card game outside of the YouTube comments, please make sure to join the Discord. So originally my list for Luffy was less of a control-based list and more so just a hand advantage, almost like a tempo-based list, which I guess you can consider most Black Purple Luffy's tempo-based anyway, because they're playing Moria. However, the list was running originally, I think, a 9-cost Luffy, and that was kind of my top end, Moria and 9-cost Luffy. There wasn't really too much to deal with the board in the late game stages. We had a lot of early game board control with the Sanjis that we were running, the 5-cost Sanji from the starter deck. I think it's 14, okay, 14. And so we were running that as like our main KO package, and we were also running the 2-cost event Gum Gum Lightning, which KOs a 6,000 power or less. As I went along and played with it, I realized that maybe KOing based off of power isn't necessarily as strong, and instead there's ways to bottom deck based off of cost within purple. Very strange enough, but it does work, especially if you have cost reduction within black. So, that being said, this is going to be more of a control-based variant of the deck, and I think that it actually comes out to be much stronger in a competitive setting. We're running 2 Time Walk Luffy. This is a Dawn -10. Place all of your characters other than this character at the bottom of your deck in any order. Then after this turn, take another turn. Activate main once per turn, pay a Dawn, and then add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck as active. So this is a great way to finish out a game, and I was running only 1 in the original list, and I think that you want to bump this up to 2 because we are running the Law Searcher to be able to grab some of our Straw Hat cards, this being a good top end piece, and in some instances this is actually a great way to close out the game after you've played many Morias back to back to back. I'm running 2 2K Sanji. This is a great card to be able to play down after you've played a 10 cost, or maybe just having a blocker in the late stages that's going to be difficult for your opponent to get past is very nice to have overall. This is also searchable off of the Law Searcher, which is great because we need to be able to find searchable 2Ks to stay alive. Then we're running 4 Black Maria. This card to me is definitely a backup plan for if you are unable to see your 3-cost Zoro to start off with, because this will allow you on 3 to play it down, use the ability, and of course you get all of the Dawn that you get from this, up to 5 Dawn, and then you subtract all of them at the end of the turn. Well, with the leader ability, adding 1 active and 1 rested, when you subtract 2 or more, which this is going to be doing, you gain a Dawn because of that. So this is a good backup plan for if you don't see this 3-cost Zoro. Otherwise, it's a 2K counter. It also can be used in synergy with the 9-cost Kaido, which is the new addition to the deck. I'm running 3 of the 7-cost Sanji. This card is just amazing at what it does. On play, you may return 1 or more of your Dawn cards from play to your Dawn deck. Then this character gains Rush for this turn, then rest up to one of your opponent's cost 6 or lower characters. So this will be able to bypass pretty much any blocker in the game for the most part if you are trying to go for game. Otherwise, this can be used as a nice little board control tool to be able to rest an opponent's character they might have played the previous turn, and then you can swing into it, either getting rid of it or asking for cards out of hand. Of course, I mentioned the 1-cost Law Searcher. This is an on-play look at the top 4 cards of your deck. Reveal it to 1-cost 2 or greater card with the Straw Hat Crew or Heart Pirates type and put it into your hand. Then place the rest of the cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. This card is going to be searching out most of your 2Ks, a couple of your threat pieces like this Sanji we just talked about, this Sanji I just hovered over, and of course this 10-walk Luffy or Time Walk Luffy, 10-cost Luffy, whatever you want to call it. The one downside with this card is that it cannot grab Gum Gum Giant because Gum Gum Giant is a 1-cost Straw Hat event, and this can only grab 2 or higher. It does suck sometimes having to bottom deck one of those, but you draw enough in this deck that eventually you will see 1 or 2 by the end of the game. Speaking of drawing, we're running the 4-cost Frankie at a 4 of. This hasn't changed. This is one of the strongest cards to play in your deck because it is a Don -2. You discard the worst card from your hand, and then you draw 2 cards, which is great overall value because we need to be digging into the deck to find some of our top-end pieces. If you cannot find your top-end pieces, then sometimes you just really struggle. But I think for the most part, this deck has a pretty good consistency to it since you are able to draw with the Frankie, you can find pieces with the Law, you can draw with the Gum Gum Giant. You have plenty of ways to get through the deck, which is overall very important for this leader. Then the card that I always mulligan for is the 3-cost Zoro. This is an on play. You may return 1 or more Dawn cards from play to your Dawn deck, set up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck into play as active, so you're able to ramp up very efficiently with this card very early on. And it is a nice body to be able to just poke at your opponent with for just 5. Very early on, playing this down is much needed. Later in the game, it is kind of a really bad card to see, and that's why we do have cards like Frankie to be able to filter out. Gum Gum Giant helps filter this out to get better cards or see more cards overall. So if it is in your hand late game, don't fret. You can get rid of it in ways that will actually benefit you. Then the new addition to this deck is the 9-cost Kaido, Dawn -5 on play. It will KO up to one of your opponent's characters the cost of 6 or less. Then this character gains rush during this turn. So there are a couple of cards you can pair it with to actually reduce that down below 6. We have a one-legged soldier, which if you play this out ahead of time and then use the effect the turn that you're going to be playing the Kaido, you can KO a 9-cost or lower, which is very powerful overall, being able to have that nice tempo swing, getting a big body on the board, removing one of their big bodies, and then potentially swinging into another one of their rested bodies to kind of clean up the board the best of your ability. Then we are running 4 Usohachi in any purple deck. I feel like this is almost a staple of 4 because of the fact that it can rest a 5-cost character or less. Overall, this is another searchable 2K off of the Law, which is once again very important, but I find this utility 2K one of the best in purple, and I'll probably say that until the end of time. And then of course we just glanced over the 2-cost one-legged soldier. This is an activate main. You may send this character to the trash. Give up to one of your opponent's characters -3 cost. Overall, by itself, not amazing. However, when you do combo it with another piece in the deck, this can be very potent and your opponent will probably be taken by surprise. The combo pieces that I just mentioned, of course, are going to be 8-cost Gecko Moria. Not really an explanation needed for this character because most people already know what it does. Brings a 4-cost and a 2-cost out. The 4-cost you can bring out is the Shirahoshi Blocker from Starter Deck 8. It says on play, give it to one of your opponent's characters -4 cost during this turn. So the 2-cost you can bring out is the one-legged soldier. So on some 10 Dawn turns, you can play out a Moria, you can bring a Shirahoshi out from the trash, you can bring a one-legged soldier out from the trash, and with this -4 cost and then a -3 cost activate main, there's a card that really synergizes very well with it, and that is Top Knot, a 2-cost event. This is main Dawn -1. It's actually Dawn -2. I think it's a misprint within the sim. It says return up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less to the bottom of its owner's deck. And the trigger is activate this card's main effect. Sometimes comes up, but more importantly here is that on your 10 Dawn turn, you can establish a Moria, a blocker, and then bottom deck a 10 cost in the game, which is really strong. And even then, you can also bottom deck Jack, because Jack is an 11 cost. You get it down -7 with the Shirahoshi and the one-legged soldier, and then you can top knot it to get it just off the field. So this combo answers pretty much everything in the game. Unless we get a 12 cost eventually, then we're talking a little bit differently. But at the point of this recording, this answers pretty much everything in the game, which is a strong combo overall. Most of the time, you're not going to be using that. This is kind of a situational combo, but a very strong one regardless. You will be using this Moria more often than not to bring out a Frankie and then a Law, so you can gain more card advantage in your hand size, which is, I think, more important. But if you do need to answer the board, you do have options with Shirahoshi One-Legged Soldier, as you did not have that with the previous build that I showed at the beginning of this meta. And of course, Sanji, I feel like this card is a very strong card in the deck overall. I'm not so sure if I want it at 3 or 4. When I have it at 4, sometimes I feel like I see it too much. And then if I have it at 3, sometimes I feel like I don't see it enough on curve, which is a very strong card to be able to play on your 6th Dawn turn. When you play out Zoro on your turn 3, you ramp up, and then you're able to play this out using the effect by putting 1 under your leader. This, of course, becomes a 6 cost when it hits the field and then can KO a 5 cost in return. So very strong. It's counterless, which is a downside, but we do have plenty of ways to pitch counterless cards, so shouldn't really be a problem overall. Talked about Top Knot, great card, great addition to the deck. And then we have Gum Gum Giant, which I've mentioned. Maybe purple's getting a little bit overtuned. I was going to say this is probably the strongest card in purple. It is a Dawn -2. You may trash 1 card from your hand. If your leader has the Straw Hat Crew type, give up to one of your leader or characters plus 4,000 power for this battle and then draw 2 cards. So this is a net neutral card. You're paying 1 to play this, so -1 card from your hand, then pitch a card for this effect, so -2 cards from your hand, and then you're drawing 2 cards. The card you're pitching is likely going to be a counterless card or a card that you might just not be able to play, or a 1k counter, whatever it may be. The fact is you're drawing 2 cards, digging deeper into the deck, and sometimes even if you can just counter out normally during the game and you have enough Dawn to play something the next turn, your hand's not looking so hot, you can play this giant out as a way to just go further into the deck, even if you don't necessarily need to. You can always over counter with it just to be able to draw further, which is very powerful in my opinion. There's different ways to play it. A lot of people play it for wait till the late game, and when your opponent's trying to go all in, then you have enough counter to be able to counter out. Great way to do it. But you could also use this in the mid-late stages of the game to be able to dig further into the deck. Overall, I think this deck has a pretty solid matchup spread. Admittedly, you're going to have a hard time against Doflamingo. It is the best deck in the format. Most decks have a hard time against Doflamingo. However, you do have a few tools to be able to handle some of the early game aggression, and you're going to have to find some of your top-end pieces very quickly to be able to beat Doflamingo. Blackbeard is another one that will be a little bit difficult because most of your characters have on-play effects. Otherwise, you're just going to play generic vanillas, which isn't the worst thing in the world because a lot of these cards have decent stat lines for vanillas. And then, of course, the other matches that you'll have in top tables probably won't be as difficult as maybe like a Dofi or a Blackbeard. You have a decent matchup against Lucci, which I feel like Lucci might be a little bit more prevalent because we have seen a fair amount of Dofis. Of course, BY is going to be probably represented somewhat in these upcoming Treasure Cups. And so I feel like Black Purple Luffy has a decent matchup into it because of the amount of big bodies it can get and fast. And also you can rest Sabos pretty easily with your Sanjis and Usohachis. Otherwise, I feel like this is a decent meta call. I'm not going to say that it's going to be expected to win tournaments, but this could be a dark horse for a Treasure Cup overall. And I think that with Treasure Cups, as opposed to, or I guess compared to regionals, they're not nearly as serious. I'm not saying that they're not serious at all. They're very highly competitive tournaments. But I think people might be going into these tournaments playing a little bit more, experimenting in a little bit more because we only have another month or so of this meta. And so people will probably be a little bit tired of playing the same stuff over and over again and maybe have a little bit more of an opportunity to play other decks, not necessarily tier 1s in the meta. Overall, I think this is a great pick to go into a Treasure Cup if you are not feeling like playing Dofi. Let's take it into the sim though and see how it does. Shanks is a matchup that I find is advantageous for Luffy. I think that the fact that, well, not the fact that, but if you can get Frankie online and be able to draw multiple turns back to back with that Frankie, I think that's very important for this matchup because having a hand size is pretty important. Being able to ramp up to big bodies pretty early on is very nice as well because Shanks has difficulty dealing with wide boards, but also has difficulty with dealing with tall boards that happen quickly. And so we didn't find any of our ramp pieces, which means this is going to be a little bit of a slower game, which is unfortunate, but still it's okay. We'll pitch out the top knot because we don't really have too much use for it right now, and we might be able to get one later on in the game with the combo. We haven't been able to find the combo piece, by the way, the Shirahoshi and the one-legged soldier off of a Moria. I guess we haven't really needed it, to be fair, but we'll see. Okay, so they use Hongo to minus the Frankie and then Marco to KO the Frankie. I think we counter out of this one because I don't want to go down to 2 against Shanks this early. We'll go ahead and play out the Sanji and KO the Marco, and we'll see if they have an event to bring the Marco back. Most don't. Most are running 6 events max. And let's go ahead and get rid of this Hongo because I don't want this thing on the field. It can get a lot of value for the Shanks overall, or over time rather. This turn, with them being on 7, they could play out a Ben Beckman to answer a Sanji. Would be rather annoying. They don't have it. Looks like they just don't have anything on curve. So we'll go ahead and put the one-legged soldier in the trash, setting up for later if we need it. We'll take this one, of course. I don't think it's worth playing out the top knot. We might need it once we get later into the game. So we'll go 6 at lead. And this turn, we should be able to just play out the Moria. Okay, so they use their leader ability on my leader. Which that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. We'll go ahead and play out the Frankie and the one-legged soldier. Use the Frankie ability to pitch out the Zoro, and we're going to put a Dawn on and swing 5. Because they have a really low hand size, I think it's more appropriate to pressure them right now before they get to their 10 Dawn turn, rather than leave one up for the Gum Gum Giant. So they go Lucky Roo into Yasop. Kind of annoying if we didn't have a 7-cost Sanji in hand. which is really good for us. So go ahead and pitch the 2K here. They want to swing Uta into the one-legged soldier, and we can just block that one. We don't need the one-legged soldier, but we might be able to use it later on here. So let's go ahead and top knot the Lucky Roo. We'll go ahead and minus the Dawn, gain the Dawn back, and then we're going to play out the... I think it's fine to go ahead and play the Sanji this turn. I was thinking about the Kaido, but we can hold the Kaido for the next turn because we have a one-legged soldier on the field. So we'll go ahead and use the Sanji ability, minus 1 Dawn, not 2, because we don't want to go down too far. We'll rest the Yasop and we'll go 7 to 6 and see if they give us a leader ability plus a 1K. They use the leader ability on the Sanji, which that's fine. I don't mind that. So we'll go 6 at lead because we know that this one will either be a 1K or not. We'll go 5 into 2 just to get the Uta off the field. I mean, there's no real reason. We want to leave 1 up for the Gum Gum Giant, and we'll swing the Moria, of course, getting them down to 2. I would imagine this turn might be a Rayleigh, it could be a Dragon, or a 10 cost. If it's a 10 cost, we're not too worried about that. If it's Rayleigh would probably be the worst option for us because they can get rid of our one-legged soldier. But instead, they choose to get rid of the Frankie, which I think in the moment might be like a good play for them. Maybe they want to pressure this Moria down, swinging 7. I have counter, so I'm not really too worried here. Fire Fist. Wow. They get our Moria down to 2. I actually am going to protect this now. They use 2 cards to try to get this Moria off the field, and we can actually protect it. Now we're going to use the one-legged soldier to minus 3 to the Rayleigh, and we can play out the Kaido to pop the Rayleigh. Now they have no board presence. Now we can swing 6. We have like really great swings here. 6, 6, 6, 7, 10, which that's really annoying for Shanks to have to deal with. Now I'll just swing 5. I'll just swing 5 here. That's not a problem. We'll swing 6 again, see if they give us a 2K or take. Hopefully they take. They take. Wow. Swing 7. They just didn't have any cards in hand where they could counter out. They could have played a 10 cost, but I don't know if that would have been a good play either, to be honest. As you can see, we can overwhelm the board pretty quickly against Shanks. Battle of the Purple Luffys. I feel like Black Purple Luffy might be slightly advantageous against Purple Luffy because of the fact that, well, I suppose if you go first, it's usually going to be advantageous regardless because Purple Luffy always likes to go first. But if you can find your combo pieces, which we snap grab the Zoro, no question about it, we'll be able to ramp up a little bit faster than them without having to take life in the process, which is overall very strong here. We do have a top knot for if they play something this next turn. So we'll go ahead and swing 7, see if they take it or give us 2 cards. They just take it. Sometimes Luffy's will counter out early against those 7 swings. I don't feel like that's the right play to make. I feel like they just take it and it'll be call it a day at that point. We'll take the 5. I don't mind taking the first hit just to fill up our hand a little bit more. And I actually think that this next turn, we could play Frankie, we could play top knot, but I think we get rid of the Zoro Juro just immediately, just gain tempo by establishing, or some big swings rather. I guess we don't really gain tempo by tempo definition. We're just equaling the board state again, so we actually still are in the driver's seat, but we didn't establish a body this turn, which could be, I guess, a problem, but I wanted to get cards out of hand instead. Just get rid of a body and then get cards out of their hand. So they countered out with 2, 1, and then took the other one. This turn's going to probably be their Zoro Juro, or sorry, Luffy Taro into Sungoro. That's their best optimal play this turn if they have it. They go 5 to 5. This one, we're going to give them a Frankie because it's okay to put Frankie in the trash, and we want to keep this body on the field. If they have a rush Sanji, that could be a problem, but I think, yeah, Luffy Taro into Sangoro, yeah, their best bet here. Definitely good overall. I think we just pressure face first because I want to get the Sangoro off the field, and I can do it with the Sanji. So we're going to bait them to counter out of these small swings so they have less counter to be able to counter out of the Sangoro, or the Sanji into the Sangoro, which will be 9 into 6, which is 2Ks, and if they go down to 3, that's going to be a problem. So awesome. We got the Sangoro off the field. That's a big piece for us to be able to answer or get off the field. Super important in my opinion. And then this next turn, they'll be at 9, so they could potentially put the Zoro. Okay, they're just going to swing into it. I was going to say they could put it in life with the 9 cost. They might have a rush Luffy. Oh, wow. They saw the perfect curve going second at least. That's good for them. Here, we're just going to protect this Sanji. We should be able to actually counter or swing back The crackback might actually be too much for them, to be quite honest. They have 1 life and no Dawn open, and we have a couple of big swings that we could potentially throw their way. Yeah, wow. I think they realized that they could not swing out or counter out of a couple of big swings with my 7 cost and then my leader, so I guess they just gave up there. Against Law, okay, so red-green Law is an interesting one where I feel they actually have a pretty good advantage against us because the fact that they are able to swarm the board is going to be very difficult for us to deal with. I think black-purple Luffy is really strong at handling 1 or maybe 2 bodies a turn, like swinging into 1 and then KOing another. However, when you go very wide, it's very difficult for black-purple Luffy to deal with that, so we're going to have to just put some pressure on. We do have a couple of Kaidos, which will be great to be able to play out. But we don't have a 5 or I guess 6 Dawn turn that I'm super happy with. I guess we'll just play out the Frankie and then use the Frankie ability to pitch the Shirahoshi or maybe pitch a Kaido. We might not use both Kaidos. It just depends. There's a world where we actually can use both Kaidos consecutively. If we get to 10 Dawn, of course, that's I think where we can. But no, they don't play out a board. They just play out Zoro here. We'll counter out because I don't want to go too low in life. And here, we just play out the Frankie. We'll use the Frankie ability to pitch out Shirahoshi, draw further. We have a Moria, which is really good because we can actually play this Moria next turn. So we're looking pretty good here. We'll go 6 at 5. They might counter out of this one just to bounce off the next attack. If they don't, they might just want more cards in hand. So we'll go 7 at lead. Give them what they want. Usually, you want to kind of starve out Law, but I think that, well, I don't feel like we have too many options to really play passively against Law and do well, considering a lot of our stuff is top end. So now we can start playing some bigger bodies turn after turn. We can go Moria and reestablish a Frankie, dig deeper into the deck. We can follow it up with a Kaido. We can also keep both Kaidos here. Because if we keep both Kaidos on 10, you can use the Kaido ability, and then the following turn you'll be at 9 Dawn. So you can actually use Kaido again. Very strong. Here, let's go ahead and just pitch out the Frankie, just so we can guarantee have one in the trash. It's an easy way to protect the Zoro. We don't give that for free. Our opponent has a lot of cards in hand, which is very unfortunate here, because it's like really going to be difficult to push through 9 cards in hand when you're going against a Law. Especially when they have like Bonney and bounce it back, or play like Nami's and play a bunch of little blockers like Chopper or Beige. So it's going to be difficult. I think this is the stage of the game where like it usually goes back into the favor of Law. But we'll see. Maybe they don't go very wide this turn. Doesn't look like they do. Just a Cavendish and a Chopper. Not the worst thing in the world for us right now. The Chopper could be a problem. I think that the Cavendish might also be a problem as well. But we don't really have a strong way to deal with it, and because we have a Frankie in the trash, I'm comfortable swinging this Frankie, just adding pressure to the Law, because usually Law is okay stabilizing around 1. We can go Frankie into One-Legged Toy Soldier, use the Frankie ability to pitch one of the Kaidos, and we drew into two counters, or 2 non-counters rather. Both of them are fine. We can play either one of them next turn, the KO Sanji or the Time Walk Luffy. I feel like the Kaidos probably are our best bet, though, just depending on this next turn what they do. Wow, they don't have any 2Ks in hand. That's actually really telling for us. They give us 2 1Ks to counter out of a 6K attack. That is really good for us because that means we can pressure with 6s going forward and probably be able to connect with them. If we swing with a 6 and they counter out with a 2, it usually means that that's the turn that they drew that 2K counter, or maybe they got it from life or something if they take it, but the 2 1Ks, very telling, and one of those is a Bonney, which is usually pretty sacred for Law to have, unless, of course, they have another one, but we'll see. Law has not been really, like, super relevant in the meta recently because of the fact that there's decks like Lucci out there that handle pretty much everything that Law throws down with ease, and so, you know, Law's not in the greatest of spots, but it does do very well against non-Lucci decks, in my opinion. It could struggle against Doflamingo, because Doflamingo is just too good. That deck is just too strong right now. But, I mean, what deck doesn't struggle against Doflamingo? This turn, they're going to swing 6 with the Chopper using the ability to minus, I think it's -3 to something, which is really powerful, being able to -3 into something. I don't know if they're going to trade into the board, but if they do, I think we're okay with that. No, they just go face. I think that's actually right. I think that might be the right call here to, like, pressure me. But I don't mind taking a hit or 2. I also have counter, so if we can counter out of that one, why not? And then if they decide to switch their target to the board, if they ask for 1 card for a swing, I think it's okay giving 1 card. If they ask for 2 cards in a swing, I don't think that's the best option. And the other thing here is blocking with this Frankie doesn't really accomplish much if they decide to go for my board, because the characters that are rested on the board are 5,000 power and the Frankie naturally is 5,000 power. So we might even guarantee like keeping a body upright with this Frankie, of course. So we'll see what they do though. I think because I countered out of that swing, they might focus their target on like the Frankie or the Zoro that's rested. And that's probably the best bet as well. Maybe blocker up, use their combo this turn to play out maybe a blocker law, reestablish the chopper that they swung with, get Dawn back with the Cavendish. Yeah, this Cavendish is so good. I don't think a lot of people have played Red-Green Law since EBO1. But the fact that this is such a great card for Red-Green Law makes me want to play around with this deck again a little bit. And of course, with Yellow-Green Law coming out next set, whew, so good. Okay, so they go 7 at Frankie, as I figured they would. Since I countered out of that first attack, it means that they're probably going to focus their targets at the board at that point. Just clear up the board the best they can. 7s against the rested units are pretty solid here. I think I want to keep my counter in hand, so I'm going to go ahead and just let this Zoro go. And now we have a couple options here. It just depends on what they do, of course. If they play out the blocker law with their leader ability, pulling back a chopper, okay? Which I'm assuming, yeah, exactly here. They probably pull back the Nami and then play out the blocker chopper. I think what we can do is we can immediately play out the Kaido. I don't think that's a bad option. I think we can play out the Kaido, get rid of the 5-cost blocker law. So that's one less like annoying blocker to have to deal with. And then we can probably just swing 6 at lead, see what they do. If they counter out, then I think we focus our attention onto the Cavendish. Because here, remember, the turn before, I think it was the turn before, rather, they had where they countered out with 2 1Ks. And they did it again. They counter out with 2 1Ks. So that means that we're just going to turn our focus onto the Cavendish, and they're going to block it with the chopper blockers, which I don't know if that's the best thing in the world for them, because if they block with the blocker choppers, that's 2 less bodies on their board, and they're at 2 cards in hand. So even if they have something they can play this turn straight across the board with all 3 cards they have in hand, they can't combo. So if they let the Cavendish go and then take the other hit and go to 0 life, even like that's not the best option, of course. Okay, so they have a Bonney, so they can combo technically, but my point being is that they use their blockers to protect the Cavendish, which those are good bodies to just have on the board to meet the stipulation of your leader ability. But I mean, Bonney will help you get there too. So what do I know? And then this next turn, what we can end up doing is just pressure face as usual. We don't have enough Dawn to do the 10 cost Time Walk Luffy, so we will have enough Dawn to play out the Sanji if they do play out some blockers. And then we can just bypass that with, if they play out a blocker here, a 9 is guaranteed to hit, and then an 11 is guaranteed to hit. So we'll see what they do, though. Kind of a challenging turn in this regard because of the fact that they don't have that much board, and they have to have a blocker. They drew a Zoro off of the Bonney search, which that's a good pressure unit, but this is not good. I don't think 9 to 9 is going to do anything because like it's an easy counter for me. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I feel like they should just get me as close to 0 as possible. And if they have blockers in hand, play them out. If they don't have blockers in hand at all, then I mean, the game's over. So one of them is a Zoro, so we know that at least. But this is the power of Luffy being able to kind of pressure with some tall swings early, like 7s, which is kind of hard for a lot of decks to deal with. And then you can ramp up relatively quickly to your Moria turn, being able to play that out. Okay, so restand law, which means they are going to get 2 more Dawn back with this Cavendish. Looks like they're going to swing again. They're just swinging 10 this time. We do have a Frankie blocker. So, oh, they're just going to go 12. 12 at the Kaido. I think we just counter out because the most they can do afterwards is 7, which would be 7 at face. And one of these cards is a Zoro. So, yeah, we just take it and then swing 9 and then all the rest on Kaido. That's all she wrote. Yep. Luffy, Zoro, and then Luffy from life. Ooh, they're rolling Goldie Roger. Very interesting build. I think standard build for the most part with maybe a spicy tech with the Goldie Roger. Awesome. I was hoping to go against a Lucci, or at least find one in some of the games for this video, because I want to be able to show off Luffy's ability. The +1 cost for some of the characters really helps out against Lucci, because Lucci is trying to reduce the cost of things and KO them based off of that, so it makes Lucci's job slightly more annoying. It's not impossible for Lucci to have to deal with, but it is a lot more annoying overall, and especially if you can ramp up and then add costs to those characters, it makes, you know, like taller characters that you play a lot harder for Lucci to be able to deal with. Here, we'll go ahead and play out the Zoro ramp up. We'll grab a Sanji because we can actually play it this next turn, and then we'll swing out 7, which 7s are great against Lucci. Even early, like, I mean, any point in the game really is good swinging 7s against Lucci because they don't have too many 2Ks in the deck, as most run usually around 8 to 9. Here, I think we can go down to 2. I'm actually not too scared of being at this point. And then this next turn, what we can do is just pressure really hard. And of course, they might have miscalculated. They might have thought that this would have been going down to a 2 cost with the swing because it's naturally a 3, and now they can only KO 1 law. Even at best, they would have been able to KO both laws, and that's not really anything that I'm scared or worried about because I want the laws in the trash anyway. So we'll go 5 at face. I think we'll go ahead and play out this Sanji. Will rest the Lucci, and I'm not going to swing into it. I'm just going to swing it at face. We'll go 6 at face and then 7 at face. Because I don't really care about this Lucci going back in the trash right now. We can take care of it the next turn. If we want to play out Kaido, we can KO the Lucci and be in a pretty comfortable position. And of course, as I mentioned, swinging 7s is really good against Lucci because it's hard for them to counter out of that. They took 2 hits that turn, right? They took a 6 and they took a 7. Their hand is probably really bricked up, which is not good for us late game. So that's why we have to apply pressure right now. We are already at 9 Dawn and they are at 7. So that's going to be a really good thing for us, or we're going to the 9 Dawn turn rather. And so that's going to be hard for them to deal with all these bodies on the board, turn after turn after turn. And as you can see, their hand is pretty bricked up. I think they didn't really have any good way to deal with the board currently, and I think the next turn it would have been over. Oh, this is rather unlucky. I don't think Bonney is amazing to go against for us. We just need to be able to get our Morias out and maybe spam the board a little bit. That first hand was awful. Too many 2Ks, not enough action. We didn't even have ramps, really. I mean, I guess the Black Maria was our ramper. And we didn't get one on our mulligan either. So really unfortunate, but let's go and swing 5, play out the Black Maria, use the Black Maria effect so that we can at least ramp up 1 Dawn this turn. And if we're so lucky to be able to get a 5-cost Sanji off the draw or off of life, then we can play it and use its effect the next turn. Otherwise, we'll just play out the Frankie, and that'll be good enough. And if they rest our Black Maria, I really don't care. So it looks like they don't have any play early here, which is good for us. I don't want them to have searchers on the field this early. It's really annoying to have to deal with Bonney's searchers. The more that you delay the game and swing into these pseudo blockers, it really hurts. Let's go ahead and swing 7. They'll likely take this one and rest the Black Maria. I don't care if they swing into the Black Maria. We will play out the Frankie and then pitch one of the 10-cost Luffys because we're not going to be playing 2 of them in this game. We might not even play 1 of them, but let's hold on to the other one because that is the only one we have left in the deck. Our hand's looking pretty decent overall. We have a couple of good plays this next turn. We can pressure. If they play out a Cavendish, we can pressure it. Okay, they don't do it. I think we go ahead and just pitch the Frankie, and then I'm being cheeky here and countering out with a Law so that I can get it back this next turn because I have a Gecko Moria to play. And the Gecko Moria getting max value off of a Frankie and a Law is, in my opinion, pretty good. So that's why I did that. That's ultimately the reason there, even though it seemed kind of stupid. We'll go Frankie into the Law search first to see what we get. Our hand's pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and just grab this Zoro to be able to pitch off of with the Frankie because I do like what we have in our hand. The Sanji, the 5-cost Sanji is a good card to be able to answer like a Cavendish if they play it. We also have a Kaido to answer a Cavendish if they play it. That's the biggest threat, I think, in Bonney's deck overall, in my opinion. Okay, I take it back. Hody Jones is the biggest threat in that deck. So they really want Black Maria off the field. Respectable. That's actually really tough for us because if we do play a Kaido, we can use the Black Maria to get our Dawn back from the Kaido turn. But they just go Hody into the Frankie, and here I'm going to go ahead and play a Shirahoshi to -4 to the Hody Jones, and then play out the Sanji to KO. But before we do that, let's swing 9 at face. They're going to rest our leader, of course. Not an issue there. They're going to be on 10 Dawn this next turn, so that's going to be a little bit of an annoyance for us. but they don't have the Hody Jones, which is also really good for us as well. And we're threatening that we have 1 Dawn open for the Gum Gum Giant. We don't have it, of course, as you can see, but I think it's important with decks that run it to bluff that they run it, because it makes going for game a little bit harder for some opponents. The 5 indicates they're going to play a 10 cost. Oh, I was wrong. They play out Shanks, which they get rid of the Moria. That's pretty good overall here. I don't think we're good enough to go, or we don't have enough pressure here to really push with a Luffy for game. So I think what we'll do is swing 8 with the Sanji and ask for 2 2Ks or maybe more cards out of hand if they don't have it. I'm okay getting them down to 1, of course. Like, that's where I want them to be, so I can play out the Time Walk Luffy, because that's a great way to close out the game. That's why I'm pressuring really hard, like with a tall hit here. Oh, they give us a 0 cost event and a Cavendish. Ooh, and one of those cards they pitched was a Kid. Really good for us here. We'll go Moria, and we'll just play out a Frankie. And I think we can pitch maybe the Sanji. We don't really need it at this stage in the game. We get a Gum Gum Giant. That's actually really good for us to stay alive here. This turn, I mean, they could play a whole slew of things. They're at their late game where they could play multiple Shanks or like 10 drops or even Kid. Any of those are kind of problematic for us. Considering we don't have a way to get rid of a Kid, if they do play it, that will be our biggest threat, I think. But we'll give them 1K here because they just swing 5 to 5. They go 11 to 5. I think we just take it. I'm okay going down to 2. And the 10 drop to freeze my leader and Sanji. Not the worst thing in the world for us. Here we can actually just go and swing Moria. Actually, we probably should have swung Frankie first. But the other thing is we can play a Shirahoshi and get rid of this Shanks. So we'll go Shirahoshi into Sanji, get rid of the Shanks, and then pass the turn. So as I mentioned, you kind of need to go wide against Bonney if you can, and this is like the best way for me to go wide, is to answer some of their board, but also get a body or blocker or both on the field, which is very nice. And hopefully here, we can protect some of our units. I think we just block with the Shirahoshi. Easy snap block. If it's another 10 drop, which it seems it is kind of annoying, but we do have likely lethal with the 10 drop of our own. Because if they freeze the Moria, Sanji, and the leader, we can swing 5 Frankie, 6 Sanji, and then play out the 10 cost, reset, and then restand our leader because the turn is over for us. We get another one, and so we're not frozen anymore, and we can swing 10, 12. And I don't think that's going to be good enough for a Bonney to counter out of. So let's go ahead and try it out. 5 into 5, the counter. 6 into 5, the likely counter this one. Yep. And then we'll play out the Time Walk Luffy, take an extra turn after this one. Of course, the leader ability procking will pay 1, ramp up, and then pass the turn, and then we make sure to use the Luffy ability again. Let's go ahead and stack all on. Maybe a mistake here. Should have left 1 open for Gum Gum Giant just in case this goes south, but I think we just YOLO it. So 10 and 12 is usually going to get us across most times than not. So overall, kind of have to play aggressive and build a wide board if you can. 10 cost Luffy can be a great card to close out games with. I've noticed some Enels have been popping up in some of the recent like regional or I guess treasure cups or whatever they are. I saw one in Australia recently. I think that one's more of a, not even a regional, that might have been a nationals. And so Enel has been making a little bit of a resurgence because there are a fair amount of Doflamingos in the meta. So this is a pretty solid matchup for us because for them, they want to starve us out and then use their KO effects to be able to get rid of stuff on the field. Thankfully, we have a +1 cost for everything. Of course, the Kuzan here would have normally answered a 3 cost and put it back into life, but because we gave our Zoro +1 cost, they could only get rid of the Law. Rather annoying, but we will pitch out the Frankie because we want it in the trash. We'll play out the Sanji, KO the Kuzan, and swing with the Zoro. Do we get punished? No. I think it's fine to leave them at 2 right now. I didn't want to swing with my leader here. They go 11 to 5. Sometimes 6 Dawn is really awkward for Enel, so maybe they should have swung at the Zoro, but maybe they also don't care about the Zoro, to be fair. I don't know. I wouldn't, if I was Enel, I wouldn't really care too much about the Zoro either. Here, we can actually kind of pressure them to put them to 0, kind of like bait them to think, oh, they're just going to swing small and we can counter out of the stuff, which granted we are. We do get punished with the Raigo, but we swing first, so never punished. We'll go 6 here, they counter out, and then we will play out the Sanji to ramp, or I guess like give us a standing Dawn, and we can go 7-7 and put them potentially at 0. If not, then take 2 cards. Oh, they take it. Wow. Okay. So if this isn't a trigger that stops us from attacking, we'll swing 7 again, and then either 2 cards come out of their hand or they go to 0, and they're going to 8 Dawn. So the fact that they're on 8 Dawn means they can only play Katakuri to heal. They don't even have that. They just go Raigo, and they might have a Shirahoshi blocker, but even then, that's really dangerous. I have a Usohachi to rest at this turn. So we actually were very lucky to be playing as aggressive as we did here. They didn't even have counter to counter out of that 7. Wow. They were bricked up. And that's exactly the play they were doing. It's insane. Finally found a black-yellow Luffy to go against, and I like this hand because we are able to ramp. We have a top knot to potentially bottom deck maybe a Kuzan if they play it on curve. If we were able to find like a one-legged soldier or a Shirahoshi blocker, we can get rid of pretty much anything else that they have. We have Sanji to rest something and attack in and apply pressure. We also have the Frankie to filter hand, and we also have the 9-cost Kaido for kind of a late game, or like not late game for us, but a nice top-end piece to play. So we're looking pretty good here. I gotta be honest, I don't really like swinging into Black Yellow Luffy. I know some people say to swing into Black Yellow Luffy and pressure them. Some people say to not swing into it. I think I'm in the party of not swinging into Black Yellow Luffy until you have a fair amount of bodies to present lethal in that same turn. So they have to kind of take their own life. And then you also have to establish bodies in the meantime. So we have the top knot, thankfully, for this Kuzan. We're going to go ahead and play it to bottom deck the Kuzan, ramp up, and then I don't want to minus too much Dawn because I want to be able to play this Frankie this next turn, or sorry, the Sanji the next turn. So I'm just going to play out the Frankie outright, not use the effect, just establish a body, establish a blocker. Even if they go down to 2 life and they play out the Rocket Luffy, they cannot KO the Frankie because it's a 5 cost. Really annoying for Black Yellow Luffy to have to deal with. We'll go ahead and take this one. And this Luffy is actually really annoying for us to have to deal with because we can't rest it with the Sanji and feel comfortable swinging into it. I think we're going to do it anyway. So we'll go ahead and minus 2 Dawn. We'll rest the Luffy. And I think we go ahead and swing. We put 1 on our leader because we want to be able to raise the cost of the Frankie here. And we'll swing 8 into 8. This will always be countered every day of the week. But that's not the point. The point is we're trying to get cards out of hand. And if they, we want to also be able to play this Kaido and get them to a point where we might pressure lethal this next turn. So let's go ahead and swing 5 with the Zoro. I feel like they might think this is a little sus, but the reason I'm doing it is because I want to be able to pressure them next turn with... actually, we can pressure them with the Time Walk Luffy as well. We have a couple options depending on how they play this out. They counter out with a 5, so I think they kind of understand what we're doing here. They counter out with a Makino, go down to 5 cards in hand, and we'll just leave the Frankie upright. I think we got 2 cards out of hand. We actually got 3 cards out of hand that turn, so very, very much strong value for us to be able to get them down to 5 cards in hand and then build this board in the meantime. Of course, this Luffy uses the ability, goes down to 2, and Ice Age, and this will probably be a Rocket Luffy to get rid of the Sanji. That's rather unfortunate, but I guess better that than maybe a Kaido. 8 into 5. Yeah, they're just answering the board here. That's rather annoying, but it is what it is. And this turn, I mean, they'll also probably finish up by just swinging 7 at lead. And do I take it? I think I take it. I think I just take the 7. Oh, they use their Three Brothers Bond, grab a Sabo blocker, and then they just swing 6. So we can counter out of that one pretty easily. Maybe not throwing the Usohachi next time. That's probably not the smartest of ideas. That's usually a good card to have against Black Yellow Luffy. I don't know why I pitched it. I just threw the first 2K I saw. Here we can go, and since they counter out with 1 with the Frankie, we'll go ahead and KO this Fist Luffy. I don't know what you call it. People call it different things. Let's put him to 1. Let's don't give them the free awakening. Let's have them use a card to do it. That's, I think, the best idea here. And then we have this Kaido threatening them for this next turn. And usually, Luffy's are running Raigos these days. So if they Raigo us, that could be unfortunate. They could also Raigo and then use leader ability and then swing into the Frankie and clear our board. We don't really have too much great top end after that because we use the cost reduction or the cost of the Kaido to reduce our Dawn. For that effect, we can't play 10 Walk or Time Walk. I've been saying 10 Walk, Time Walk. They're both, I mean, you know what I mean. They do have the Raigo, unlucky for us. But that being said, because they did play Raigo this turn, they aren't able to use their leader ability to play out the small like the babies, and then pump their leader up. So the leader is sitting at a 5,000 power right now. So we can actually still pressure them pretty hard. What we can end up doing is we can go and swing 7-7 because we don't have a Gum Gum Giant. And I don't think it's worth threatening them with that. So let's see what they do. Let's see if they take the 7. They're thinking about it, so they might counter out here. Regardless, I don't want them to be in a spot where they can Moria this turn and be at 2 life at the end of the turn, because they do have the baby Luffy and the baby Sabo perfectly set up. So they go 7, they take it, which means that Fist Luffy goes to the bottom of the deck. And here, if they do have a 2 and a 1, they might want to counter out so that they can keep on that 1 life loop. 1 life loop is usually the strongest that Luffy's at, especially if I have a Time Walk Luffy to play. It's hard for me to close out the game if they're at 1 life there. If they're at 0 life, it's a little bit easier, but still. Point being, can be difficult. So they use their leader ability. They have the Moria to play out a Rocket Luffy to likely get rid of my Law. Then they'll play out the Sabo, and they'll pump their leader up, so their leader's at 11. I cannot defend my Sanji. Unfortunate. They've actually taken the game back over at this point. They're in their late game loop, which is really annoying. Also, the other thing right now, there's a bug in the sim where Sabo, blocker Sabo, is able to draw 4 and trash 4. So Black Yellow Luffy's able to really sculpt their hand out and their trash out exactly how they want. It's very unfortunate. It's a game-breaking sim experience, but it is what it is. Let's play our Time Walk Luffy and just establish his body. Now that we've taken an extra turn, they're at back to 5,000 power. I might want to swing 10. That might be the better option here, but I also am kind of afraid here. So I'm going to go ahead and play the Black Maria, get our Dawn back up. We'll swing 6, ask for a 2K, and then swing 12. If they have a Raigo to follow up with, then yeah, we're going to be in a little bit of trouble. But the following turn, basically what I want to do is kind of establish this 10 cost Luffy, and then now that we have 10 Dawn again, the following turn, we can Usohachi if they have 1 Sabo blocker out. 12 and a 5 will always be a block from Sabo. They don't have enough counter for that. Or if they did, they didn't want to give it to me. So I don't blame them there. Here, I feel like the Luffy might want to pressure face. If they have another Moria, which they likely do, they'll probably play it out. And then, depending on what they get, their hand size will be probably about 5 or 4. If they play out the Rocket Luffy, they'll be back at, I think, 5. If they don't, they might be at 4. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, but we'll find out. They have a couple of plays here, so we'll see what they do. They pitch out... Oh, so double Sabo. So this means that they're going to be able to play a Moria into double Sabo. That's really hard for us to get past. That one, we just kind of have to brute force. Oh, they don't even have the Moria. Okay, wow. So they get rid of the Black Maria with a Rocket Luffy. They have 1 Sabo. Trash or draw 4, trash 4. That's such a broken effect right now. Oh, yeah. And then here they just probably pressure face. And I think it's fine for us to go ahead and take this. I'm gonna be really cheeky here. I'm gonna actually play out the Usohachi this next turn and just go for game. Yeah. I think that's the best play. I say we YOLO it. Just go like rest the Usohachi, swing like 11, swing 13. Is that the right math? Yeah, we put 6 on our leader and then 1 on the Luffy. If this 11 goes through, then we put the 1 on the Luffy, the character Luffy, and go 13. If it doesn't, then we just swing 12 and then hope that we get a Gum Gum Giant out of life. Oh, okay. So they have enough counter here. Good for them. They go down to 1 card. So we're going to actually swing at the Sabo and leave them at the 1 life. It's kind of awkward for them because they have to have a baby Sabo to get this last Sabo off, or they have a couple different ways to also get this out. Okay, so they play out the Fist Luffy to use the Fist Luffy ability to trash that last life so they can heal up to 2. And we'll see what they have in hand. They have 2 cards in hand. They pitch a Hiyori. Oh my god. Which also means that if they need to use their leader ability here, or not leader ability, if they use like the baby Luffy effect or baby Sabos, if they use the baby effect, point being is that they'll be at 0 cards in hand, 7,000 power, 1 life, and we have 3 bodies on board if that's the play they make, and we can likely win. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Let's go. Draw 4, trash 4, and then here they just swing at life. They get us to 0. We'll take it. We don't mind going to 0. And that's why we leave one open, just in case. Like, we are in a very dangerous position. We did get the Gum Gum Giant out of life, which is nice to see. Okay, so here, just a simple swing 7 as many times as possible. 7 with the Usohachi. This will always connect or block, and either way, if they block, they lose. If they connect, they lose. It's just game over. So we'll swing 11, 12. Close out the game. We won that game of attrition, but it can be difficult if they start seeing their combo pieces. Hopefully you guys also see the strength of this deck. I think that Black Purple Luffy's really just undervalued as a leader. Of course, with Doflamingo being just as good as it is, I understand why, but I do think that this leader has some fight in the game overall. I think that the way that this build goes, being able to control some of the top end pieces that your opponent plays out is very valuable. Being able to bottom deck things, if you go against Blackbeard, for instance, using the top knot to be able to bottom deck a Burgess just for free is great value. Love seeing it. This build, I think, helps go against Blackbeard a little bit more because of the top knots. Otherwise, though, I feel like this has a strong place in the meta as maybe a tier 2 deck. Not going to be an expected winner, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, but I really, really enjoy playing this deck. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think that's the most important thing here is that you play a lot of top-end bodies, and it's just fun. It's a fun deck, but also has a competitive aspect to it, and what more can you ask from a deck? So overall, hopefully you guys take it into some treasure cups over the next month for OP09 and finish OP09 strong with some Black Purple Luffy wins. Let me know in the comments if you do. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next video.